Amazon was not the first or only player in cloud computing. In fact, there are many companies providing robust solutions for the cloud. It can honestly get a little confusing sometimes trying to understand the differences between them to make an informed decision. In this section, I thought it would be good to talk about some of the more popular competitors and the differences between them and AWS. First, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Microsoft Azure. Both companies residing in the Seattle area only makes the competition between them that much more fierce. Azure was started by Microsoft around 2010, as the cloud became a major player in computing. The general model of Azure is kind of the same as AWS. Provide a range of computing services with on-demand scalability and flexible pricing. Speaking of pricing, it can be difficult when comparing pricing between the two services since they don't offer the exact same sized offerings. It does appear that Amazon's pricing is more competitive, but that really shouldn't be the main factor when deciding on a computing platform, especially since the pricing is close enough between the two. So when should you consider Azure over AWS? Although AWS does provide Microsoft-flavored computing services like IIS web servers and Windows virtual machines, there may be some advantages to running on Azure if you're primarily working with Microsoft tools. The expertise available from the technical support may grease some of the difficult points when working with Azure. Additionally, Microsoft is going to give some priority to other products they produce, so it may be a better platform for things like .NET applications. And what does AWS hold over Azure? The first is size. AWS currently has 33 different availability zones compared to Azure's 22 regions. This also isn't an apples-to-apples comparison because of the way each classifies their locations. But Amazon is the current frontrunner and aggressive on increasing their reach, leaving Azure to try and keep up. The other benefit to AWS is the amount of services they offer. While Azure achieves parity with the core services provided by AWS, there are many new innovations that Amazon is pursuing in cloud computing, like Lambda and API Gateway, that Azure has yet to provide competitors to. There is a lot more to compare between Azure and AWS, and Pluralsight has a great course comparing the two. Definitely check it out if you're torn. It's called Understanding the Difference Between Microsoft Azure and Amazon AWS. The next AWS competitor we'll talk about comes from another one of the big names in computing, IBM's Bluemix. Bluemix is a fairly new cloud provider officially launching in 2014, and it takes a slightly different approach, being an implementation of the Cloud Foundry open source specification. This means that any apps running on Bluemix can easily be migrated to another Cloud Foundry certified service provider, of which there are a few. If service provider lock-in for your web app gives you heartburn, the Cloud Foundry platform specification might be your antacid medicine. In addition to freeing up your application, in case the worst happens and your provider bites the dust, the processes for managing your cloud services are portable as well, ensuring the time you take to master Bluemix won't be disposable. The downside to Bluemix is also around its adherence to Cloud Foundry. If you want to stay truly portable, you'll have to avoid any Bluemix specific services. If you only need the core cloud services, then this should be sufficient, but one of the best parts of the cloud is the deeper and deeper integrations and variety of services available. Bluemix has some fascinating innovations like Watson, their artificial intelligence solution, that will make it difficult not to use more than just the core Cloud Foundry services. The last service provider we'll look at is a little different than the others, but it should be familiar to many developers, and that is the provider Heroku. Heroku originally started as a cloud computing platform for Ruby on Rails applications back in 2007, when Ruby was one of the hottest web languages of the day. For many years, it was exclusively Ruby before expanding and now supporting just about any major web language. In addition to languages, it also began to introduce more and more connected services like database and enterprise solutions. Its main value proposition is the simplicity to deploy and scale an application. I've used Heroku myself, and I can attest it is really easy and quick to get started. There's a really slick command line tool that can deploy your app in a couple of commands. I do highly recommend Heroku for new developers getting their feet wet with deploying hobby applications. But with simplicity comes a trade-off: lack of options. Heroku focuses on doing one thing well: simple and streamlined application hosting. And they succeed over many of their competitors, even AWS. Unfortunately, their services don't offer many of Amazon's options, and their global reach with only 6 regions falls far short from AWS.